1 second, just trying to confirm.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Texas Public Policy Foundation's weekly livecast, where since March at the beginning of COVID and what seemed to be a crescendo and craziness of 2020, we've been coming to you with the newsmakers, great authors, patriots of our generation. Today is no exception as we welcome our longtime friend of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Senator Jim DeMint, whom I'll introduce more fully in a moment. But that's a way of saying that today, on what will be our last scheduled live cast before the Christmas break, we will return in full in 2021. We're going to end the year with a bang, and we're going to cover not just Senator DeMint's new book, but also his thoughts about what we've endured in 2020 and what we might be in store for in 2021. If we haven't met, I'm Kevin Roberts. I have the privilege of serving as your host as well as the executive director of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Senator Jim DeMint is the chairman of the Conservative Partnership Institute. You may also know him as a 3-term House member from the great state of South Carolina and 2-term senator from that same great state, which, as I'm sure he will remind us, played a vital role in the outcome of the Texas Revolution nearly 2 centuries ago. Those of you who are tuning in from Texas and attend our events in person know that Senator DeMint is right up there with our own senators from Texas for a number of appearances at our events, including our annual policy orientation. In fact, he joined me earlier this year, which, Senator, seems like 10 years ago at our annual event. And we talked about some of the topics we're going to cover today. But anyway, sir, I know it's busy for you and you have your hands in so many important matters. I'm just really grateful on behalf of all of us in our audience that you're with us today.
Kevin, I'm honored to be with you. And every chance I get to be with you folks at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, I take it because you're such a leader, not only in Texas, but as you well know, your organization is part of our partnership center here in Washington and have a big impact on national policy. And you're the example for many of the other state policy organizations, including the one I helped to form in South Carolina. So we're very grateful for what you're doing, and I'm honored to be with you and a lot of your audience today.
Well, thanks so much. That it's always fun to see almost always fun to see the social media chatter leading up to events. You know better than most, Senator. There are some people out there who just don't agree with everything we have to say.
I can't believe that.
Two things. Number one, that's fine. It's America. But number two, I think the point is a lot of people were planning to tune in today because they love your cheerfulness. And I think if anything, that's what people are looking for. And so before we get into the book, which is I mentioned to you this morning, I did do my homework. I did it quickly, but I can commend the book to our audience very genuinely. We'll get into that in a minute. But the question of the month, Senator, what's your assessment of what has happened with the election cycle of 2020? And what do you think is going to happen between here and Inauguration Day?
Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost a great president, at least for a few years. And regardless of what people might say about Trump's style or personality, his policies were so good for our country, particularly working Americans of all races and genders. The data proves that. The good news, Kevin, is that his policies were what we call conservative policies. And he proved that if we just do what we say, that people will appreciate it. Now, I have a lot of concerns about the election. There was clearly enough evidence of fraud in a number of states that I'm disappointed that more people are not willing to take it seriously and actually ridicule people who ask questions about it. And I appreciate Trump pursuing it. It doesn't look like that there's going to be any recourse now. But I know that there are a number of organizations who are going to look into this, a number of states who want to create coalitions to look at voter or election integrity. I just don't think we can leave this, because a lot of us don't have confidence that our votes count if a number of states are actually able to manipulate the vote. So I'm disappointed, and I don't blame people for holding out for maybe more legal recourse. It just doesn't look like the evidence we need is going to be given to us by states that are controlled by Democrats. But after this election, I hope we'll keep trying to get to the bottom of it.
Well, it's essential. And as I've been explaining to some left of center friends, and for that matter, folks who are left of center and maybe not all that friendly to me or you or our organizations, asking questions about the legitimacy of certain precincts or certain states. They tend to be controlled by Democrats, unfortunately, and the legitimacy of those elections is not the same as saying we're not going to congratulate President-elect Biden for winning the office. And the point is that we can chew gum and walk at the same time, and we can go ahead and be good Americans. And while we're not going to enjoy most of the policies of a Biden-Harris administration, we can at least acknowledge legitimately that they won, but also question future elections, particularly if some of the same practices that we've just begun to unearth occur in 2022 and beyond. We've got to fight like heck to make sure that those aren't repeated.
We do, Kevin. I mean, it was clear the Democrats wanted to create chaos, and they were successful. I mean, just mailing out unsolicited ballots, and it's not unusual to talk to someone who got more than one ballot. I talked to someone here in DC who handles our security. They have an office here. He got 2 ballots at his apartment, even though he lives in Nashville and votes there. He didn't ask for them. And so, you know, we've laughed at dead people voting in Chicago for years, but this is far beyond that. And we know that the Democrats are fighting us on just election integrity because they don't want verifiable IDs. They push back on in-person voting. They want non-citizens and illegals to vote. They want people to vote from prison. They want to change the law so 16-year-olds can vote. So it's clear that they want to use vote counting to change outcomes. And so I think everyone has a good reason to be suspicious. So we needed to do more before the election, but our Constitution allows states to control their elections. And so those states that want to have election integrity are going to have to keep pushing.
Well, that's right. And as you know, because you were instrumental in this many years ago at our foundation, we kicked off Right on Crime, conservative criminal justice reform, using a state-by-state model. You have been a vital leader in that as well. I think what we're looking at our foundation is, as a result of this election, as well as some voter integrity issues we discovered in the spring primary elections before COVID was really even too much of a factor in Texas. These things need to be corrected, and we need to move state by state. That the solution to this really is not a federal one, but one that's scaled state by state, that's going to keep federalism intact. It is a little bit of a longer solution, but I'm hopeful that we're able to harness the legitimate frustration and even anger that our American friends have about the election and into some of these solutions. That's really what your organization and ours do. And I think it's crucial that we do that in the next election cycle and beyond.
Yeah, but I just want to encourage folks. I mean, we've got a great country, and we're going to do everything we can to keep Mr. Biden from actually rolling back a lot of the things that we know are helping Americans. And that's what's so frustrating. They can see when a policy is helping people, helping them get jobs, helping them create a better life, and they still want to change them just because of the money that's behind a lot of their interests. But we're here, and I know Texas Public Policies is going to be here. We're going to be pushing back. And we need to add a lot of prayer in that mix, but we need to be faithful and keep working to save this country.
Oh, amen. Well, look, I'm sure that we could spend an hour talking about the election, and that would be fitting, as many of our audience friends will remind us. when we get to audience questions here at the bottom of the hour. But we're here to talk about your book. You're such a humble, modest guy. You're not even so interested in selling a bunch of copies as much as you are as conveying the message. And I think it's crucial. Those of you who haven't yet seen the book, it's entitled Theyre Lying to You, 10 Lies That Shape Your Truth. And what the senator does.
I've actually brought a book here that They're Lying to You. And Kevin, we printed this ourselves at the Conservative Partnership, and we mailed out about 100,000 free, and we gave it to Amazon essentially, and they've been selling it for $6 or $7. Kindle's $1. But like you said, I don't make anything off this. If there any money happens to come in, it's going to be for the Conservative Partnership and to help build a movement. But it was so important for people to know that these lies that we're accepting are shaping the way we see the whole world, and it's certainly shaping election outcomes as well.
No, it's crucial. So just walk us through. I'd ask this of all the authors we have on this live cast. That's always timely, we know from history, to talk about the lies that are being given to us. Why were you motivated to write the book now?
Well, I see so much that's not true. Now, we all know the Bible verse that if you know the truth will set you free. And I think Jesus was talking in a spiritual sense there, but it's very true politically, economically, in our culture. You can't have a good relationship with another person, whether it be a spouse or child, if you know people are not telling you the truth. And so it's a very serious issue if what we're hearing through the media is not true. I have a little bit of an advantage over a lot of Americans because I work here in DC. I'm involved with a lot of the policy issues, a lot of the meetings. And Kevin, frankly, it's almost hard for me to turn on the news, particularly CNN or these other stations, when they're reporting something that I know to be absolutely false because I was there. And they're saying it with a straight face, with conviction. And then I'm wondering, how can America remain free if we don't know the truth? So I wanted to write this little book. It doesn't include all the lies, but I think a lot of Americans this year have just sensed that we're not being told the truth. We know we weren't being told the truth about the virus. It wasn't affecting everyone. It was affecting older people, primarily with pre-existing conditions. Yet they use that to shut down our whole country, our schools, and we couldn't get the truth about what medicines worked well, and that part was frustrating. And we certainly feel like we haven't gotten the truth about what Trump has done. He's been the most vilified, mischaracterized person I've ever seen in politics. And if Americans really knew him in person, I mean, he's a fun guy to be around. I mean, he's serious, but he's not the person that the media presents him to be. We're not being told the truth. So this book just goes into 10 lies. Certainly there are many more, but these are 10 big lies that actually shape the truth of many, many Americans.
Yeah, and I think the umbrella statement for this, I'll read a sentence from your book just to wet the whistle of our audience friends. You say, progressivism increasingly appears exhausted as a movement of political reform, having morphed into a moralizing marketing scheme for the American elite's corporate religion. And I just love that because it's so true. And it leads me into thinking about the table of contents, the organization of the book. The first lie you deal with is religion is hate. Tell us why you started with that one.
Well, because it's consistent with tyrants throughout history, is they have to separate the people from their God, because God is an alternative authority, regardless of what religion. But many people in America, whether they be Christians or Jews, a lot of others use the Bible as their format for shaping their lives and their culture. And if you want to control things as a government person, you try to diminish the value of religion, in many cases get rid of it. We've seen that plenty of times in history. But when people are looking for God for their moral compass, then they're competing with the woke left and what they're trying to sell us. And so, and we've seen it. We're not making this up. And the confirmation hearings, Kevin, I mean, they attack people's religion. If they wrote an article about Jesus being the way of salvation 20 years ago, when they were in school, they are attacked if they're trying to be confirmed. And so they're trying to make true religion a hate crime in a sense. Now, they say they believe, but as you pointed out in the quote, the left is very religious, but their religion is government. And that's how they try to push people, by separating them from God.
Well, I agree with that, and also agree with one of the claims you make in a subsequent chapter entitled "Climate Change is the Greatest Threat to Mankind," the third lie that you cover, because I find a lot of people go beyond what you and I, especially as outdoorsmen, as I know many of our audience members are just as stewards of God's creation. We would never do anything, whether in business or in private practice or private behavior, to harm the environment. But some members of the left, not all, but an increasing number of them, see the climate, they see the natural world as their religion. And it's something that really has disordered even our ability to have a rational conversation about policy concerning the energy and the environment.
Yeah, and just think about the implications of that. If you really believe the climate changing is the greatest threat to you, your family, and mankind, the only way to deal with climate is to let government do it, not just our government, but worldwide, a global government of some kind that they're pushing us to. And whether it's too hot or too cold, or it's dry or it's wet, they're saying that's climate change. Now, if we're so bold as to say that we don't believe in climate change, they can ridicule us, and rightly so, because the climate's always changing. And the curious thing, which no one seemed to notice, is this used to be called global warming, but they couldn't, in fact, prove that on a global scale, and it was inconsistent. And people were even talking about the global warming had taken a pause. So they changed it to climate change. Who can argue with that? But the real question is this: is man-made carbon dioxide causing dangerous increases in global temperatures? That's what they're saying. But carbon dioxide makes up 0.04% of our atmosphere. And man-made carbon dioxide is less than half of that. And anyone who understands statistics and how variables work and dominant variables, it's a statistical impossibility that a trace element like that is controlling the temperatures on Earth. I mean, we know that the sun is 99% of the temperature, and the substance that actually retains heat more than anything else in this world covers 3/4 of it, and that's water. And to go in and say that this man-made carbon dioxide is increasing temperatures, I don't think you can prove that. I know you can't in the real world. In the laboratory, if you increase carbon dioxide to 30 or 40% and test, you can say that it retains heat, but the whole thing is ridiculous. And even the most avid climate changer knows that we cannot change the temperature more than 1 degree over the next 50 years if we do everything that they want us to do. So it's just an excuse to get more power and control. And that's what all of these lies are about.
Well, that's right. And as you know, we have a division of our foundation called Life Powered, which tells the story, the beautiful story of affordable, reliable energy and the connection between access to that and lifting people out of poverty. Over the last 30 years, 1 billion people or more have been lifted out of poverty because of their access to that kind of energy. In some places, that's going to be one energy form. In other places, it's going to be a different one. But the point is that the left, but given its intellectual tyranny, doesn't even want to have that conversation. They don't even want to give you the opportunity to mention the statistic you did, that if we were, in fact, to implement at the cost of tens of trillions of dollars, the Green New Deal, we wouldn't even have an iota of an impact on global temperatures.
No, and Kevin, and I don't want to get into particular policy things, but this country has an abundant amount of natural gas, could last us practically forever. Compressed natural gas can run cars and trucks with practically the same engines we've got. It would cost us almost nothing to reduce emissions by about 1/3 if we just switch to natural gas. And it's something we have here, It doesn't take all the refining. If the left was really interested in the environment, they would be jumping on moving to natural gas instead of all this other stuff they're talking about in the Green New Deal.
Well, it's true, and I won't get too far into the weeds because our purpose isn't specific policy details, but I would be remiss if I didn't highlight for our audience, underscore something that you just mentioned, and that is one of the great investment opportunities in the energy business right now is natural gas plants in places like California, where because of the latency in energy from solar and winds, even though they're subsidized by the taxpayers, we have to have some kind of power source in order to make up for that default on peak energy days. So it's fossil fuels are not going away. Our environment, our air and water are the cleanest they have ever been in our history. And just to swerve into one policy prescription we're going to see from the Biden-Harris administration on this, rejoining the Paris Accord is going to do nothing. All it's going to do is embolden China to continue to be the world's worst polluter.
Yeah.
But you cover that, and I want to move on so our audience gets a full picture of the book. We could go through each of these chapters, Senator, but in the interest of time, I just want to cover a couple of other topics you mentioned. One of them very much related to what we were just talking about regarding the myth of climate change is your chapter on capitalism, in which you say that the lie is capitalism is for the greedy rich. Tell us why that's a myth.
Well, the facts don't bear it out. In fact, capitalism has pulled more people out of poverty than all the government programs ever created throughout history. And we've got some examples in the book, particularly in Asia, where we had really high levels of poverty. And within a relatively short period of time, as they've adopted capitalism, they pulled a whole lot of people out of poverty. We've done that in our country. We've seen it in the last few years under Trump. Just a few changes that stimulated economic growth have pulled a lot of people out of poverty. But capitalism is built for human nature in the sense that it forces people. You may be greedy and have all kinds of character flaws, but if you're going to make money in a free enterprise system, you're going to have to give somebody something they want. You're going to have to serve them and in order to get money to make yourself rich. So it actually turns human nature into something that helps people, because we're all out trying to create something of value so that we can improve our own lives. And it's a concept that works, and we've seen it work. And the idea that capitalism is for greedy rich, no, it's for the everyday man. And I like rich people. I've never had a job that wasn't given to me by somebody who had more money than me. And when I had my own business, all my clients had more money than me. So I've come to appreciate people who are willing to hire me and use my services. And capitalism is what we all need to not only make our country better, but to give us all a brighter future.
Well, that's well said. So in the same vein, I want to cover two other topics briefly with you, and then we'll turn to audience questions, Senator DeMint. If you're in the audience, by the way, and you have a question for the senator, just go to the comment section of whatever medium you're using to watch this live cast, type it in, and we'll get to your question as time allows. Senator DeMint, related to this commentary about capitalism is another lie you engage and really try to explain why it is incorrect, and that is that big government is good for the poor. Yeah. We're about 60 years into the so-called war on poverty and have not seen poverty rates decline. Why is that?
No, not only have they not declined, but we've destroyed families. We've created incentives for people to have children without being married. We've created disincentives to work, to get a better education. And so a lot of what we've done with government that was supposed to help people has actually created a trap for them. And once you get on these welfare programs and Medicaid, it's hard to work your way off of them without losing pay, without losing benefits. These programs could easily be redesigned so that as people get a job and get raises, that they can transition off of these programs so that there's a reason to work. But big government, and we've got this in the book, and every chapter is short, the whole book's just 120 pages, but you can see that whether it's public education, whether it's welfare, any kind of Medicaid, these big government programs, they hurt the poor.
That's so true. And we're not going to get into a lot of facts and research, but if you're in the audience and you're curious about that, both of our organizations could help you with that analysis. It's obvious. And I would say, I would underscore something you said. It's actually a love for the poor and vulnerable for us as conservatives that causes us to want to change those programs. It's not a desire to throw them on the streets. In fact, we really undermine the dignity of many people who are on these programs. Last thing we'll cover, and then we'll get to audience questions, is a timely issue. Your organization and ours have worked together on the thorny problem of border security and immigration reform. And even before President-elect Biden is inaugurated in a month or so, we have begun to see a spike at our southern border in illegal crossings. In other words, anticipation that the enforcement of our laws will be more lax, and therefore we will see wave after wave of illegal immigrants as we saw a few years ago. Tell us why it is a myth that open borders are compassionate.
I think the Democrats want to make us believe that this is America's charity program to the world, is we just open our borders and people can come in. But every particularly illegal immigrant who comes in this country costs those who are already here money. It costs them jobs. It gives us, again, it brings a huge net cost to it long term. They use our services, our schools, and unfortunately, that we know there's good data that the taxes they pay over the lifetime is less than the benefits they use, which means somebody else has to pay for it. And in fact, even the people who come here, so many are abused en route. Their money, their life savings are taken so someone can take them across the border illegally and bring them here. And then they start out in effect as an underclass. The average education of an illegal is around eighth grade. There are very few good jobs for them. And again, we're not helping those when we create this idea that if you get here, it's a free ride. And that's what they're selling, these coyotes, as I don't think Biden knew why we were talking about coyotes, but is what they call the people who bring the illegals here. And once they're here, if they're our neighbors, if they're friends, I mean, we as Americans are going to treat them as decently as we possibly can. And it's not a citizen's job to enforce the border. We just need to know if we do not have border control, we are not going to have a prosperous country, and that everyone who comes here illegally is taking something from those who are citizens and those who came here legally.
Yeah. Well, Senator, great conversation thus far. As you will not be surprised to know, the best questions come from our audience. And so we're going to turn to them. We already have some questions flowing in. The first from one of our audience members is about your book. And this audience friend asks, Senator DeMint, not having yet read your book, do you, in addition to analyzing problems, cover solutions for each of those lies, each of those problems?
Yeah, it's usually the opposite of the lie. Well, if you just read the first couple of pages of each chapter, it's just the real facts. Like religion is hate. The facts that we give is that the people who give most to our society are religious people, the people who give the most to charity, who adopt the most children. You just look at the facts, you see that religion is what spurs the best of us. And so all I give is the facts. So you've got the solution is usually the opposite of the lie.
Yeah, that's great. So let's see. Next question is more of a general strategy question. What's your best piece of advice for conservatives as we enter the Biden-Harris era?
Yeah. Well, let's just remember what we learned during the Trump era. And what I call it now is the American movement. Trump emphasized the idea of America first, not to be selfish, but the best way for us to help each other in the world is to be the best we can as a nation. And people who are elected to Congress or the presidency are elected to serve our people, our citizens, the people who are in our country legally. And so when we do trade agreements or foreign policy, or we look at domestic policy or immigration policy, everything should be focused on what's good for this country. How can we make it better? And in doing that, we become the light of the world. We become an example of the world, and that's how we make the world better. We can't run all over the world telling them how to do things when we're not doing it ourselves. So what I see going forward is to take a lot of the ideas and build them into a conservative movement that is an American First movement.
Sure. So one of our audience members, actually a couple of them, have questions about the lies themselves. You and I just touched on 3 or 4. One audience member is asking, Senator DeMint, would you please list off all 10 lies from your book? So this is a great test of your memory, or you have the book in front of you, or your friend Kevin can read them off here for you.
Well, I'll read them if, excuse me, if we have time. Well, you read them while I take a sip of water.
That sounds good. I wanted to offer that. So religion is hate. America is racist and evil. Climate change is the greatest threat to mankind. White people are privileged. Women are disadvantaged. Capitalism is for the greedy rich. Big government is good for the poor. Open borders are compassionate. If you don't agree with the left, then you're a racist. And the Constitution is outdated, unfair, and unnecessary. And so now that Senator DeMint is ready to go again, there's a follow-up question, Senator, and that is, so many lies. Where do we start?
Yeah, this is a small sample. Well, as we have more secularism in our country, lying is more of an art form to a lot of folks, particularly in politics, but we've seen it in the media. A lot of us can't even turn on the news anymore just because these things are flying in our face that we know aren't true. So the pursuit of truth is got to be something that we as Americans, as Christians, Jews, I mean, we need to understand that if we accept lies, lies are used to enslave people and to control them. And it's a very serious matter when we're not getting the truth from our schools. Most of these lies are taught explicitly or implicitly in our public schools, in our universities. And if you went out and challenged any of them or many of them, you would be ridiculed in social media. So I thought I would just start out being bold, and things like climate change is the greatest threat to mankind. Somebody just needs to say that's nonsense. I've got the facts. That's not true. You cannot control my life based on that lie. And that's what we need to say about a lot of these. And Kevin, just quickly on the Constitution, it's being challenged today. You mentioned federalism. People don't like they say they don't like the Electoral College, but that's because our country was never meant to be a national government. There is no one in the Constitution elected by a national popular vote for a reason. That the people who formed this country wanted to keep a lot of independence with the states so that people could be free to be different. And when people are free to be different, they can get along. But if you try to make everybody the same, that's when people get angry, feel like you're taking their freedoms away. So the Constitution is set up so that it can be changed. It has been changed, and it's created the most dynamic and prosperous country that's ever existed. It's foolish to think it's outdated.
Well, that's well said. And one of my personal pet peeves dating back to my days in the classroom as a history professor is people referring to America as a democracy. Most people who say that have the best of intentions, but some of them don't. And the reason that we need to make the distinction is that every democracy is in history to some extent or another been really prone to the passions of the polls. And we're seeing that right now, especially with the ideological totalitarianism of the left. Your book, in a lot of ways, in a few of the chapters, touches on that. So it's one of the major reasons I commend it to our audience. So, Senator DeMint, we have a couple of looking ahead questions. I'll pose these to you and then ask the final question, which I ask all of our guests. One of these questions from the audience is, what's the best way to get truth to the forefront again? What's the path forward on all of these myths?
Well, a lot of it gets down to the truth. And part of what we're working on here is to help people see what media sources are now giving them the truth. one of the problems we have, Kevin, is a lot of the major media, cable stations are kept in business by corporate advertising. And corporations in America have become the most leftist groups in the country. And if you look at like Fox News, someone like Tucker, who seems to be trying to tell us the truth every night, the only people who advertise on him are the MyPillow guy and the pain relief people. You don't see Ford Motor Company or GM because they're trying to squeeze that message out. Moving forward, we've got to work on this idea of how can we have the best informed citizens. To me, Kevin, the most important issue, one that we can actually affect, is the idea of education choice. We've got to take our children back from the state. We cannot keep sending them to secular schools that don't teach them the truth about anything. And they're not learning even the basics of reading and writing. So the idea of education choice, and I know we've worked on it in Texas a good bit, but we're spending enough money to give kids the best education in the world, but we're just not letting the money follow the student. So if we can, moving forward, let's realize if we keep educating our children with lies, we're not going to have a free country. That's where we need to start.
Yeah, I think so. And for too long, American taxpayers' hard-earned money has gone to sustaining bureaucratic education systems, most of which are hostile to the whole idea of America, rather than those dollars following the child. And I hope that we're on the brink of a real sea change in how we conceive of funding education. In fact, it could be one of the silver linings of this whole COVID experience.
It is, because we're not going to get anything good done in Washington, I guarantee you, with Biden as president. But the states have a lot of flexibility. A number of states, Arizona started education savings accounts. About 12 to 15 states now have some version of that. I know Texas has looked at it. So that's something we can work on. And I guarantee you that would change our country more than anything else in a positive way if parents began to pick the schools their kids go to.
Yeah. One more question from the audience, and it's a looking ahead question about the Georgia Senate races. What, Senator, is your take on the stakes of the Georgia Senate races, win or lose? What is a conservative's approach to relations in Congress next year?
Well, it's pretty serious. The stakes are high because without those 2 Senate seats, the Senate cannot be a backstop to what Biden wants to do. If it's 50-50, if we lose those races and the vice president under Biden can break the tie, they can do anything they want. They can change the rules of the Senate so it no longer requires 60 votes. They can make DC and Puerto Rico a state, which means they'll each have 2 senators. We'll probably never have a Republican majority again. They can add 5 people to the Supreme Court, all liberal, without any Republican participation. There's nothing, they can socialize medicine completely. There's just no way to stop it. So, I mean, certainly we'll try. We're not going to give up no matter what happens. But I think the 2 Republican senators are going to win Georgia if they can get a fair vote. And I think the good news there is with so many eyes on that state, it's going to be harder for them to cheat, even though they're going to use the mail-in ballots again to try to create chaos and confusion. But hopefully they'll do some audits of signatures or things to make it a little more legitimate. The stakes are high. Let me just leave it that way.
Yeah, they are. And talking to some folks who are monitoring those races closely, they really are very close. So there's a lot. Senator, all through this year, I've asked almost all of our guests at the end of our conversation one question, and that is, in spite of one of the most challenging years in American history, why are you still hopeful about the future of this country?
Well, I just get around the country enough to know that what we see in Washington, what we see in the media is not America. I know Americans aren't racist. They love each other. They work together. They play together. And there's a great spirit in our country, even though if you look on TV, you would think, well, I apparently hate people and they hate me for various reasons. America has got a lot of wonderful people. And one of the things I've learned, Kevin, is you don't even need a majority to change things, to change the tone of things in this country. It's just a solid core of well-informed, well-intentioned Americans can make things better in every family, every city, every state, and certainly our country. And so I'm just optimistic that, despite the fact that Trump was vilified again for 4 straight years, lied about, mischaracterized, he still got more votes than any Republican in history. That tells you in the heart of many Americans is this spirit of freedom and independence, and they're ready to fight for it. So this country is is a gift from God. I feel like we're all stewards of it, and we never have an excuse to give up no matter how bad it gets. And what I tell people who tell me it's too late, I just tell them we've got a better chance than those guys who signed the Declaration of Independence.
That is exactly right, because in the private memoirs of a lot of those signers, they believed that signature on the Declaration was their death warrant.
Yeah.
Well, Senator Jim DeMint, thanks for this conversation today. Thanks for everything you've done for this country, that you will do. I hope you know how grateful your friends in Texas and beyond are for your leadership.
Well, Texas is just a big South Carolina. I always feel home when I get there. So thanks for welcoming me. And Kevin, thanks for all you do.
You bet. Senator Jim DeMint, thanks for joining us. You and our audience, we wish you all the best, especially during Christmas and the holiday season. May God bless you, Senator. May he continue to prosper the work of your hands, and may he continue to bless this great country. Take care.
Thank you, Kevin.